Hi everybody!
At this point in time, it's safe to say the Persona franchise has eclipsed its parent series. Since I struggle to pronounce its proper name, I'm just going to refer to it as SMT. If you've got a problem with that, bite me. Anyways, micro hostilities aside, I recently covered a Persona fighting game leak. That same leaker around the same time also covered the fact Atlus wants to remake the first two Persona games. We already know Persona 3 Reload is coming, a game I've already covered a little bit on this channel, so I wanted to cover why a remake of the first Persona title and the Persona 2 duology of games makes a ton of sense for the remake treatment, unlike, Persona 3. Part of why it makes sense is because the first game is now 27. The duology that comprises Persona 2 are also 24 and 23 years old respectively. If they'd been movies, they'd have been rebooted and remade a few times over by this point. Clearly, video games aren't movies though, and while they frequently get ports to other systems, remakes do happen, but they don't happen as often as you'd think. Sure, remakes have been around since the early days of video games. Just look at the Lunar titles. They mostly happen either when fan demand is there, or when technology reaches a point the developers feel like they can get closer to their original vision. Then you have cash-grabby remakes. Yes, I'm looking at you, The Last of Us Part 1. Anyways, Persona 1 and 2 are pretty much demanding remakes at this point in time since the games are pretty old and the mechanics are, quite frankly, antiquated. These games, of course, owe more of their DNA to the SMT titles, as Persona is, of course, a spin-off of that franchise. So it only makes sense as to why they'd have more antiquated mechanics beyond just being older games from an era where games were more experimental, though that does still hold true to some extent. So it just makes sense for Atlus to remake those games at this point in time, as they'll now be able to not only get the games far closer to what they probably originally intended, but they'll also be able to tweak the mechanics to be more in line with the modern Persona games, which will make a lot of Persona newcomers happy, as they'll be able to experience the games with a fresh coat of paint while also having some of the creature comforts they've grown accustomed to with Persona 4 Golden and Persona 5 as a whole. While a lot of Persona fanboys are of course going to complain about Atlus simplifying mechanics if these remakes do happen, it's only a good thing for the franchise as a whole. It's a good thing because more people will get to experience these games, and it makes zero sense to gatekeep the fandom. As a whole, gatekeeping is a stupid practice. If your favorite properties are reaching a wider audience, that's generally speaking a good thing, as it means your favorite franchises are bringing in new blood, and new blood means the franchises are less likely to stagnate and you'll get more of those titles. It only becomes an issue when the core identity of a franchise is completely disregarded just to bring in new people. Also, let's face it, the Persona games were always intended to be a more friendly experience to the player base. If you want hard just for the sake of being hard, the full-fat SMT experience is what you want, not its many spin-offs. There are so many SMT spin-offs, I've lost track of them. Either way, the point I'm trying to make is a more homogenized Persona experience is ultimately a good thing for the series. By making the games more accessible, it means the series can be played and enjoyed with a unified playstyle, and it won't feel like you're playing a different game entirely. Also, let's face it, how many individuals are going to hunt down an original PS1 copy of Persona or the Persona 2 duology? Not many. Since the original versions are locked on older hardware, it greatly reduces their accessibility either because people no longer have the hardware to play them, or because of the cost of them put the games out of reach for the vast majority. Vintage gaming is a cool hobby, and it's one I'd love to dabble in more of. However, you have to realize people into retro games are pretty niche. It makes up only a very small segment of the gaming population, and as the saying goes, money talks. For a lot of companies, they want to make profits off their older properties, and they can't exactly do that when games are being sold on the second-hand market. Also, let's face it, remakes, technically speaking, are a good thing for the industry for another reason. They help with game preservation to a degree. In recent years, because of the shift to digital, for a lot of consumers, gaming preservation is becoming more and more of an issue. Remakes are just an imperfect solution to that. In that instance, remasters are going to be the preferable option. However, some games just didn't age well, and thus a remaster isn't as feasible, as that'll be appealing to too niche of an audience. Basically, Persona 1 and 2 are super old games, and they are deserving of the remake treatment because it would mean the Persona player base would be able to access all of the games in this subseries of SMT on modern hardware. I imagine we're going to see these remakes on current generation hardware in the next couple of years, but when do you think we'll see them, and when do you think they'll officially be announced? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe. 2 of my previous videos will be popping on screen now. Check them out, and until next time, keep blazing that trail.